Monday. It is September the 16th, and you are locked on to the Sportsline Podcast on the CHCH News Podcast Network. I'm Bubba O'Neill. Hey, thank you so much for hanging out with us. As always, the focus, athletes, executives, officials, teams, and broadcasters who hail from Southern Ontario and have become a success. Today's guest, a local who knew his calling and followed through at a very early stage of his life. This hometown Hamilton product has the gift of gab, and communication in the sport and business world is his specialty. After getting his feet wet in the CFL's league office, Norm Miller became a very popular guy in the community as the director of communications for the Hamilton Ticats, and did so during their heyday as Grey Cup champs. Remember that, folks? In addition, he was the communications manager for one of Hamilton's most successful events, the 2003 Road World Cycling Championships. Since then, his talents have taken him to City Hall in Hamilton, Burlington, Halton, and the Niagara region. But if you do know the name and recognize the voice, yes, he is one of the outstanding analysts for the Brantford Bulldogs on Cable 14. Norm, this is great that we actually get to sit down and do something like this. I think about it, and I look back at what you've done, and really, you did start at a young age and had some outstanding, jobs in your career to get you to where you are.
Yeah, thanks. Great to catch up. And I mean, you and I see each other in passing so many times, so this is great just to sit down and have a chat. Yeah, I was super fortunate. I mean, I took sports administration at Laurentian University, and you know, at that time, 50-some people would get into the program, and 49 of them wanted to be general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, right? And that's what everybody went into the program thinking that's what was going to happen. And then you kind of get into it and start to realize that, all right, there's a whole lot else, and it was a Bachelor of Commerce degree as well. So Bob Wenzel, who was professor and founded the program and a former Vanier Cup winning quarterback with the Alberta Golden Bears way back in the day. He founded this program at Laurentian way back, and one of the first ones in the country, but it also came with a Bachelor of Commerce. 1988, he launches an internship program that hits perfectly for me and is very fortuitous because I end up working at the Canadian Football League as an intern. You know, and a funny story, I'm in Toronto visiting a then girlfriend at the time, staying with my sister, and suddenly my dad phones and says, hey, they're calling you to come in for an interview at the Canadian Football League. And I'm like, I'm here. So we run out. I've got nothing. I mean, I'm there with nothing, right? So we run out and buy a jacket and tie and the whole bit and go for the interview next day with a guy named Ken Darrett, who went on to eventually work for the San Diego Chargers. And Ken hires me, and that's where the journey starts. So, you know, it's funny. There's so many people out there who want to get into the business in sports or whatever it might be, and you know yourself when that moment comes, if you're ready, sometimes it can be life-changing.
And if you're not ready, be ready.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Hey, you know what? I got to ask you this because I think this is when you and I really first met, is during those early Tiger Cat days. And boy, they were a winning team back then. They were really good.
Yeah, no. So it's funny. So I started the team in 1993. Neil Lumsden called me up. I was still at the league office then, and you know, he says, "Are you interested in a change?" So we kind of talked through it a little bit, and so I decided, all right, I'm going to take the plunge. I found out years later that people like Al Craig and Ted Michaels, because at that time the Cats were going through some real challenging financial.
In your beginning, yes.
Yeah, and they're like, "We thought the league sent you here as a spy." And I'm like, no. I was interested in coming here, and yeah, I mean, first year 6-12, you know, and then I think 4-14 the year after that, and then sort of the bankruptcy, and then Dunnigan comes in 95, and Cavillo, and don't quite make it. Dunnigan, you know, that was sadly the end of the run for him, for Matt Dunnigan, and yeah, from 90, but then Lancaster comes in 98 after a 2-16 season, and you know, that's when it all started. But, you know, it's funny, that 2-16 year, and I don't know how much you remember that in 97. So Don Southern was head coach, and he gets fired, and Urban Bowman takes over partway through the year. We had a run of games where we'd be winning by big scores. We went to Winnipeg, we had a great team that year, and we're winning 41-14, and we blow it in the fourth quarter. We go to Toronto, we're winning by 20-30 points, and we blow it in the fourth quarter. And so there was something there with that team. And then some key additions in 98, and that's when the fun started, right? 98 and 99.
You know, when the little general did come in, what did he do? I mean, like, it's like he brought a couple guys of his guys, obviously being the likes of Flutie and McManus, but there was more to it than that. He brought a culture, didn't he?
Yeah, so as you know, you were there that night, the 99 team Grey Cup reunion earlier this season in the game against Saskatchewan. And even talking to the players now, 25 years later, and the way they speak about Ron Lancaster and that coaching staff and what they're able to do. And you're right. I mean, it was a culture. It was a way there was a confidence that came with that as well. And that there was a framework there with that team. There was a foundation, and that was just what they were able to do is take that and take us over the top. And, those players now, you still talk to them. They still speak in glowing terms of what he did and the confidence that he gave those players and the trust. And, one of the interesting things is he was really a player's coach before his time. And the way that he set out our season. So I don't know if you ever came across this, but you'd have a bye week at some point in the year. And he said, I'm going to give the players a schedule for the year so they know. If they want to go home for a week, they can go home. None of this, if the team wins, I'm going to do that, or if they lose, I'm going to do that. And he laid it all out for the players right at the beginning, so they knew what to expect from him. And he was very clear in his intentions. And, he had 3 rules. Be on time, pay attention, play like hell. Mm-hmm. And very simple, really.
I thought it was really interesting that when I do talk to some players from that squad or that era, it's consistent, and not to say this in the proper way,
right,
but that he treated us like men, and it was that simple.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he, the old joke during the Grey Cups when we played Calgary in back-to-back years is their teams were coming in from curfew and our guys were just going out. Now, I mean, that wasn't. I don't know how true all that was. I was too busy doing all the things he had to do. But
fair to say, it was a different era back then.
Oh yeah,
things were done a little differently.
Yeah, and that team. I mean, they had a lot of fun, but when it was time to play, they were ready to play, and. After the first 4 or 5 years, as I said, we had some decent teams. I mean, a couple of 8 and 10 seasons, and some playoffs, and went to an Eastern Final in that first year in '93. And one of the few times I saw Paulus Balderson, miss a game-winning field goal. Otherwise, we would have gone to the Grey Cup at 6-12, which is crazy. But I think that. You'd go into a city where, previously you'd think we have no chance. Like, we're going into Edmonton in some of those years, and you're thinking there's not a chance we're winning this game. Like, that's in the back of your mind. But hey, we're going to go out there, and then we go out there with Ron, you and that team with McManus and Flutie and Hitchcock, and Morreale, and all those players, Calvin Tiggle, Montford. You could keep going, right? We went into any game thinking we had an opportunity to win, and I still remember it was '98. Labor Day. So we'd gone into Toronto. I think we were 6-1, 7-1, but we'd gone into Toronto and got blown out early in the season. And I still remember vividly Ron coming off the field, and he had this little smile on his face, and he said, "Let's get out of here before they score again, Norm." And that was kind of his, like, when it was over, right? Mm-hmm. But then we beat them on Labor Day here, and that just seemed to turn things around, right? I mean, and that Argo team years before, led by Flutie, they were unbeatable.
Sick.
Unbeatable.
You also, I want to kind of ask you about this too, because whenever I think about great things that have happened in this city, and that World Road Cycling Championship,
right,
like that was a big, like no one understands what a big undertaking it was. And, we've tried for Commonwealth Games and stuff but that was kind of like a little mini Commonwealth Games getting that. And the attention of the world was on the city of Hamilton, and you and your people completely delivered.
Yeah, a number of thank you. And there was a lot of people that were involved in that. David Braley was, he was the honorary he was the chair of that event, and really with his connections and what a great sportsman and what he's done over the years, right, for Canadian sport. And for his hometown city, Hamilton. So he was certainly involved in that, and a really key figure. Neil Lumsden, of course, now cabinet minister and provincial government was leading the
Lummer
was leading the organizing committee, and just a lot of great people that came together and to run something that let's face it, not a whole lot of people followed. Cycling. They'd maybe watch the Tour de France, sure, or a big event or a big race, but
Olympics.
Olympics, absolutely. Yeah. But there wasn't a whole big group of. There was certainly, like a lot of sports, there was a core group of people who follow it that you're suddenly quite surprised to find out, right? And Steve Bauer was instrumental in that, great cyclist, and everything came together. And I sometimes think, and maybe it's because I was involved, I think this way, but that event really changed the way a lot of people looked at the city. And, I still remember you'd hear anecdotal evidence because, of course, with cycling, there's all that aerial helicopter coverage, right? And now you're seeing those cyclists. It's happening in October around Thanksgiving weekend. And you're seeing those cyclists go up the Queen Street Hill with the fall colors, and there's trees. And there'd be people saying, I didn't realize Hamilton had so many trees. And it showed that we could, put on a big event. And it really was a success, and it certainly didn't get off to a great start, as you well know. Yep. A lot of people that weren't happy, streets being shut down. We had, that created the 2 March breaks in the city that year because people went away in October, and really kind of hit its stride about Thursday, Friday. People started to realize what they had, and we were able to go out and watch it. There was a lot of spots where you could go out and watch the race for free, and it really caught on. Yeah, it was a great week to be a part of, and at the end of it, we really felt satisfied of a job well done. And I don't know if you remember, but right after that, Hamilton was in the bidding. That was the first time they bid for the Commonwealth Games, and it ended up going to Delhi, India. Yeah,
it was close right down to
really
the end.
Close, yeah.
Really close that Hamilton we're going to get big games like that because we have the infrastructure, the people cared enough, volunteers, all the stuff that it goes into it. But yeah, I always remember that because it was just a big league event, and like you said, it was cycling. But then all of a sudden, everyone kind of got into it. As you said, everyone warmed up to it and said, by the way, do you know what's going on in the city right now? Right. It's amazing.
Yeah, and the big thing was Lance Armstrong going to come or not come? And wouldn't that have been interesting, right? Given all that we know now that we didn't know then, right? But that would have been, that was the talk, was that, could we get Lance Armstrong here, and would he come and compete, and what that would have maybe done, because he was one of the most famous athletes in the world at that point.
Well, ready to talk some sports?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's do it, folks. Let's do some square off action. Hey, Saturday afternoon, the Tiger Cats said, a really good-looking crowd on a Saturday afternoon at Tim Hortons Field. The hometown stunned the Ottawa Redblacks, who were on the verge of a postseason berth. 37-21 was the final score. Well, Hamilton improved to 4-9. And you say, okay, 4-9. But this is seemingly a different team to me. I don't know what I'm seeing. What are you seeing?
Well, I think what we're starting to see is, much like a lot of good teams, Bubs, what we're starting to see is this offense in particular put together some drives when they need to. You go back to that Labor Day game, that throw that Bo Levi Mitchell made late. Was it the O'Leary Orange?
Yeah, O'Leary Orange.
Inside the 5 to basically put that game away. And then, Ottawa makes it exciting there, right? Makes it 29-21. After the Cats were up 29-6, and we're all thinking, oh, great, they're home and cool. Let's put the 2 points in the win column. And suddenly it's 29-21, and again, a nice drive, capped off. Greg Bell, big touchdown run that you go, okay, like maybe this team has something. And saw some numbers in Scott Radley's column this morning with what the defense has been doing in terms of turnovers, and is not making a big difference.
It's making a huge difference, I think. And I know Chris Jones came in there with the pedigree, and people were thinking, yeah, this guy has been horrible. Like, I mean, the Elks, and honestly, Elks Eskimos in his time there were absolutely horrible. And even worse, they were horrible at home. They just didn't win a lot of games. But if people know the Canadian Football League and know what Chris Jones is all about, it's defense. That's been his specialty. So he no longer is the GM or the president of football operations or the head coach. He is centering on his defense right now. And that's something that he's worked with Scott Milanovich in the past before. And it's really coming together because you see the way these guys are flying around. No disrespect to Mark Washington, but there's a big difference there. And I think because the defense has been so effective, an offense that has been putting up all kinds of yardage and a lot of points too, they're shining.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see when players start playing with confidence, right? And whatever that can be. And listen, you followed sports long enough to know that there's some coaches, for whatever reason, the leap from coordinator to head coach, or even bigger leap is head coach to general manager, right? To have that as your portfolio. And some coaches make great coordinators and don't necessarily make great head coaches, right? I mean, that's just kind of the way it is for whatever reason. But yeah, certainly that defense and the turnovers that they're generating and the way they're flying around, it's a lot of fun to watch. And you've been around this town long enough to know, Bubba, that defense is the heart of every team here, and Hamiltonians for whatever reason, they're all about the defense, and a long tradition and history certainly is part of that.
Well, you remember old Ivor Wynn. Like, how many times any one of those great defensive units, I think of like the Montforts and whatever, and maybe it's a 2 and out and they get a sack on that second down and 10 play, and that's all it took for people on, I guess that would be the east side of the stadium, to stand on their feet and give that defense a standing ovation every single time. And that, you're right. Offense is great. They never really wanted a lot of offense. Give me just enough offense. But yes, the pride and joy, the hard-working defense.
Yeah, and in flashback, go back to a memory, 1999, I think we played Montreal 4 times that year. But regardless, the first 2 or 3 times they'd beaten the Ticats handily, including one game where we kept running out of defensive players. And then they came here for a game sort of second half of the season, late third of the season, and Rob Hitchcock just laid out a receiver. And we went on to win that game by a big score. And that changed a little bit of the tenor of that rivalry between ourselves and the Alouettes that year, between the Ticats and the Alouettes, that, all right, they knew that sent a message, so to speak.
Final thing about the Cats, okay, so I have to be honest here, and the saying goes, the season doesn't start until Labor Day.
Right.
The problem is there's only 5 games remaining. They're 4-9. Can they make the playoffs?
There's always a chance, right? And interesting enough, the crossover is more of a play right now than passing the Argos for a third spot, right? The Ticats
never happened on the other side.
Never happened on the other side. Is 4 points out, right? And lots of football to be played. I think it's just nice to see the team starting to play some good competitive football again. There were some tough home games, including that game against Edmonton.
Yeah, and it's a shame because you think about some losses, the loss to Ottawa in Ottawa. I think of the home game against Saskatchewan, games that really were in the Tiger Cats' hand for victory, and somehow they blew it. And it's like, I know you can't ever go back, but if you just got maybe 1 or 2 of those right, you'd be in such in a better position.
Absolutely.
All right, Saturday night, the Alouettes and Stampeders played to a 19-19 overtime tie. And of course, if you know the overtime format in the Canadian Football League, it's the 2 mini games, and they end up still tied. Were you satisfied with the end result, Norm?
Yeah, well, I think this is the hard thing. I think now in football, back in the day, we'd have ties at the end of regulation, right? But now there's this desire to try to resolve every game. And I think what the CFL started to find with that shootout overtime format is it would never end. You could go back and forth and have 5 or 6 of those mini games. So I'm somewhat satisfied. I appreciate the fact that at a certain point you need to just call it, because otherwise you could be playing all night. What do you think?
But isn't that what makes it, like if a game went longer, like if it went like, it's like the shootout, like in hockey, you're like, oh my God, it went 14 shooters. Like, isn't that what we would hang, what a classic game. But I don't think it has to go that way. I think that really starting at the 35 is too easy for professional athletes nowadays. I think you start at midfield. Right. And I think you would get a resolution to a game, probably still in the 2 mini games, if you start at midfield. These kickers are so good right now that if you're starting at the 35 and you get a couple of yards, well, they're essentially kicking an extra point, no?
Well, you're essentially, right, you could take 2 kneel downs and you're in field goal range.
You're in field goal range, right? But I think you're an extra point because the extra point now is, 32 yards?
Right.
Like, it's easy for these guys. So I think you got to move it back to the 55 and really make the offense work. And I just think that the I get one, you get one, if you start at midfield, wouldn't happen.
I like that, actually, because you're right. Now the offense has to accomplish something, right? They need to at least get probably a first down. Mm-hmm. If you're at midfield, that's a league record field goal, I think, if you're kicking from there. So,
sure.
Yeah, you at least got to get some yards and make something happen. And that's not I don't like that. That's a good tweak.
Well, I do like what they did in the second generation of it by adding the fact that you have to go for 2.
Right.
That really helped it too. I thought that made it speedy a little as well too. You're right. we would take away in the NHL in all sports. We still do it in soccer, European football. A tie is a tie.
Right.
But we're in North America, and we don't want ties.
We don't like ties. No.
We don't like ties, and we got to get a winner, for crying out loud. So I think until they make a tweak, I think it's a very unsatisfying feel. When it was ending, when the game ended, I still think there are people out there that go, "Is it over? It's over? It's over? Yeah,
now what do we do?
Over. Now what do we do? Yeah. Well, it's 1919. Get your point." Sunday produced an unusual amount of upsets and close games in the National Football League. Folks, I don't know anything about the NFL. I can tell you that right now, because so far as it stands going into the Monday Night Football game in my pool, and I'm just picks, I have 2 right. I've never had such a poor week. But I know I'm not the only one, right? Because I think the leader has 6. Which game shocked you the most?
Probably the Cowboys at home.
Oh, yeah.
Losing to the Saints. I mean, the Saints, it's early in the year, so it's tough to tell who's who really. But, I mean, for not only to lose at home, but to get blown out at home by 20 points, something like that. Yeah, somewhere in that area. And
41-19, I think it was.
Yeah, and I saw it in, I fared a little better than you so far in picks straight up. But, there was a number of games that some really big upsets, weren't there?
Yeah, it's, again, the any given Sunday in the National Football League. Right. And, yes, we can be a fan of both leagues, right? We can love the CFL and we can love the NFL too. But, boy, there is something about the National Football League that just – I don't know what to say. You just never know. And it doesn't even come down to injuries or whatever. It's just straight up execution. And I'm just thinking of my way of thinking in terms of that Dallas game, because that's a game that I was like, are you kidding me? And it started early, too. It was 21-3 or 21-6 right out of the gate. And Dallas offense, I know there's a lot of pressure on Dak Prescott. The Dallas offense moved the ball, but they were settling for field goals. But every time the Saints got the ball, and I'm sorry, Derek Carr ripping and shredding up your defense in Big D in Jerry's house? This is inexcusable. I wonder how he felt. I mean, and I love it because they kept, shooting the camera to him as well, too. And it was just... I mean, that's all he can do, right? Because he knows the cameras are on him. He must have been so embarrassed.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly a big home loss. And then you look around and you see teams like the Ravens are 0-2. I mean, tough schedule opening with Kansas City as their first game, certainly. But
they're supposed to beat the Raiders, no?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think they're a favorite in that game as well. So, yeah, you're looking at some teams that really tough start. And then, meanwhile, closer to home, the Bills, which I know we're going to talk about. But you look at and a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, that's my team, Bubs, that nobody really kind of fancied. And now they're sitting at 2-0.
Well, let's talk about Pittsburgh. Maybe the quarterback situation, you don't have to tweak it if you don't have to. I know Russell Wilson is getting paid all the money, but Fields, maybe he's the future?
Yeah, certainly, tough start for him in his career in Chicago and some up and down moments. But what they've done is they've put him in a situation they've really focused on their offensive line. That's an area that they needed to improve, and they're allowing Fields to really manage the game. I think, which I know is that's the old cliche, right? But when you have players like T.J. Watt on defense, and Highsmith, and it just makes such a difference. And I think that and a great kicker in Boswell. So I think right now they've got a good formula. That their schedule gets tougher though as you go along, and I think that's the thing too. I mean, here we are sitting in week 2, and so much can change. It's really hard to get a sense of where teams are at after they've played 2 games.
Well, I mean, I know as I brought it up the other day, I know Peter King's no longer with us, but the fact that the Monday morning quarterback is the most wonderful thing, and for whatever reason, the NFL brings it out of all of us. Let's go back to last week, and there was a lot talking about the Bills and Dolphins game, and of course the injury to Tua Tagovailoa was the big headline. But if we're going to move forward to the Bills and where they are right now, they are now 2-0 with 2 rather impressive wins, one in comeback style and one in a complete blowout on the road. They host the 0-2 Jaguars next Monday night. So after a short week, they get a long week and time to rest and prepare. There was a feeling when Stephon Diggs was traded away, and that, they've had a number of injuries. Poyer goes to Miami, who was their longtime defensive back safety, the heart of the defense. And there's a whole new cast of characters. And there was a lot of people that believe the window for the time being has closed. Do you still think that? Not that you did, but what do you think?
Yeah, still got a great quarterback in Josh Allen. Still got a number of key pieces on that team, and we've seen this sometimes in football, right? The old addition by subtraction. You maybe move, receiver moves on, and that creates more opportunities for other players to step up, or maybe allows you to have a more diversified offense. And that was a really impressive statement win in Miami, and the Bills have had some pretty good luck. I mean, many years ago, when you and I were younger, the Bills could never win in Miami. Now it seems they go down there and have a little bit more success over these last few years, and certainly an impressive win. And you get a Jaguars team that's coming in reeling a little bit, who also I think lost at home, and now you've got that in front of you, and that's a pretty good opportunity for Buffalo to maybe go to 3-0.
Yeah, and I think there's everyone to start the season. And I don't know what you thought. I mean, you listen to this. There's so much pregame and preseason prognostication. Let's be honest. I got a little fed up of the Jets are going. Like they're going to the Super Bowl on this defense. And Aaron Rodgers, he's back and ready and healthy. And I think the Jets are going to win some games. And they were pretty sturdy and held on for a nice victory in Tennessee. But they held on to beat Tennessee, in my opinion. You take the wins as they come. It doesn't matter who, right, at the end of the day. But, I mean, I'm not really prepared to quote, crown the Jets at this point. I think the Bills are a better team.
Yeah, and suddenly now you've got the New England Patriots in the picture as well, right? Aren't they 2-0 right now?
Yeah,
and the Belichick era, one of the greatest coaching runs
actually,
of all time.
They lost in overtime to
that's
Seattle.
Right. That's right, yeah. So,
but they played well.
But a good start for them at 1-1, certainly. And a lot of people had them, looking to be in a little bit of a down year as well. So certainly what's shaping up to be a very interesting AFC East.
The Ontario Hockey League, well, their regular season is just over a week away. Bulldogs, I don't know what you thought. I thought midway through the season, they were trading away their stars for draft picks. Jordan Donovan, who was probably their big name defenseman, he's off. They get a bunch of draft picks and a couple of character players, and then they go on a crazy run. They get hot. And, they push Ottawa in the playoffs as well, too. Where is this team going into 2024-25, Norm?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting season ahead in Brantford for the Bulldogs. Their second season there. And, you talked about the Jordan Donovan trade. 8 picks came back. He went to the Saginaw Spirit. That trade certainly worked out for the Spirit, who won the Memorial Cup, and Donovan was involved in the game-winning goal, helping to create that goal by keeping the puck in at the blue line. Yeah, so I think for Brantford, a lot of young players, a Rookie of the Year an OHL Rookie of the Year in Jake O'Brien, defense core that we'll wait to see. There's some rumors that Jurčić, the Czech defenseman, may be coming here. Nothing is being confirmed, but they upgrade their goaltending with Ryson Leenders, local kid, and so they're going to have a nice battery with him and David Igorov. Defense, probably one of the unsung heroes of last year was Owen Protz, who ended up getting drafted by the Canadiens. Came over, he was a middle round pick from Sudbury, and he came over to trade for Noah Van Vliet, who went the other way. And Protz stepped in, 17-year-old defenseman playing on the first pair and played great. Ultimately what happened to the Bulldogs last year is they really started to run out of gas towards the end of the year. They took some. They brought Thomas Hammer in from Kitchener, import defenseman who played in the World Juniors. He was hurt early on. Nick Lardis went down in early January as well. So now you've got a number one defenseman and your top goal scorer gone for half the year. And that team still, as you said, Bubba, pushed on and ended up challenging it. It only went down to the last weekend or two. Otherwise, they could have potentially won that Eastern Conference. And but yeah, I think this is a team with a lot of young players. Merrick Van Acker's he's got a little bit of an injury, but they've got some good depth up front with Lardis. Assuming he doesn't make the Blackhawks. He would have been with them with rookie camp this weekend, I would have presumed, right? Yeah, so he, you're looking at Lardis coming back. You've got O'Brien, and then we'll see what happens with their overage group. They've got a number of players, half a dozen players that could come back as overage players, right from Florian Jacki to Zach Lavoie to Patrick Thomas, Cedric Sanokatundu on defense, Hammer as well, and Ben Bujold, who's a really useful forward. So That'll probably determine a little bit the direction that they go. I think you look around the Eastern Conference, Barrie's looking good, and the Brampton Steelheads, formerly the Mississauga Steelheads, seem to be just picking up players wherever they can, and they'll be an interesting group to watch this year. So a lot of fun ahead this year in the Ontario Hockey League, and as always, it takes a little while to sort of sort out what's going to happen, and some of those teams, much like we just talked about a moment ago with the NFL, that you look on paper, oh yeah, that team's going to be the one that wins. Suddenly the story looks very different once you get into the season.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys that are really curious to me. And O'Brien, for given the mantle last year and an opportunity at 16 years old?
Yeah.
And he really took off. Like, he was really exceptional. We know what Lardis can do. He can put the puck in the net from anywhere. Testa is a guy to me, too, high draft pick. I thought he kind of grew with the team, kind of a smaller stature guy. But I feel like this is a big year for him as well, too.
Yeah, Testa came over from London and a couple of seasons ago and had a couple of injury moments, but really high-skilled, dynamic, speedy offensive player and one who can create. We saw him score some really nice goals last year, so he's an interesting player as well, and that's a good shout by you.
Well, and here's something else that really made me curious too, and I'm maybe being a little weird here, but okay, two assistant coaches that come in Kuwabara,
right,
along with Vince Lays, is back with the program. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a real compliment in the fact that Andreas Karlsson ended up in a really good role with the Oilers in development, and Andrew Campbell also moves on to the American Hockey League as a coach, and that's maybe a good sign, Bubba, when you have your coaches, your management being picked up by other teams and getting opportunities at a higher level. Lays and Kuwabara are both quality coaches. Kuwabara did an amazing job back when they were the Ancaster Avalanche, back in the GOJHL, and squeezed a lot of that team. I know that Reed Duthie and Troy Islikar speak really highly of both, my broadcast partners out there, and I think that's going to be a really interesting season ahead. I'm looking forward to it as always. I mean, the fun thing, American Hockey League when it was here was fantastic. I mean, that was one of the best 4 or 5 leagues in the world, Bubba, and I think you would see players come in, but the Ontario Hockey League, there's really a different story and narrative that you get to follow, and you get to see someone, we just talked about it, right? You get to see Jake O'Brien come in his first year, and suddenly you're like, oh, there's something here. This is kind of interesting to watch. Or you watch somebody like Merrick Van Acker, who in his first year had some injury problems, and then last year he turns into one of the most dynamic players on the ice. Great off the rush, on the counterattack, off the attacking the edge of the defense. And you see someone like him come in, and you go, wow, this is fun to watch and see what he's starting to do. And that's kind of the neat story, I think, when you get junior hockey versus a little bit more in the AHL. Both leagues fun to watch, both leagues unique in their own way. But I think what you get to see in junior a little bit is that those stories develop. And the AHL, we didn't get to see Connor McDavid, right? Because he went straight to the NHL. Whereas he barnstormed around with Erie for 2 or 3 years and sold out buildings wherever he went.
And we were lucky. We were very fortunate here in Hamilton to get the likes of, I guess, out of 93, I guess, that year with Carey Price, and they go on the wild run. They win the Calder Cup, and, Subban comes in the year after. But I'll always maintain this, and this is no knock on the American Hockey League, and this will mean nothing for them because it's been a league that's been around for numerous years and will always still be there because there's a necessity for it. But as a home team and a broadcaster in the city too, my opinion was that the players, they don't want to be here. Inherent, they have to be here for growth, and they're looking forward to getting out of here because there's a big team, there's a bigger goal for them because they want to be with the NHL team, right? Ultimately, that's just the way it works. To me, in the Ontario Hockey League, it's the best junior hockey in the world. And the best players that are going to be going to either those AHL or those teams right out of the gate into the National Hockey League, they're right here. So I think we see better hockey, younger hockey, people that want to be here. I think both Bulldog franchises were great in giving to the community and doing all that kind of stuff. I mean, Michael Andlauer has just been famous for that. But I just think the level of the AHL is that, yes, there's going to be AHLers that are going to be lifers. Like, it's just the way it goes. Like, you're meant to be an AHL hockey player, and at some point you have to accept that. but ultimately you want to get to the big league, right? Like, so I'd rather have the junior hockey. I think it's more exciting. And those years, yes, it was great to see the Calder Cup, but those years where they went to Memorial Cup, I'll never forget those years.
Yeah, and I think what you probably get in the American Hockey League is sometimes a little bit more transient, right? From year to year.
Transient is a great word.
Whereas, in the Ontario Hockey League, for the team's building, you start to see that core stay together maybe for 2 or 3 years. And yeah, and I think the other difference between the two leagues is the American Hockey League, again, top 4 or 5 league in the world, much more structured, much more defensively responsible, whereas in the Ontario Hockey League, you can get some nights where the home team, whoever, you're watching a game and you think, 4-0 after one. They're home and cool. The next thing you look and they lost 7-5?
Because they're kids. Because they're kids. They make mistakes.
Mistakes galore, absolutely. And it makes it's a fun product to watch. And yeah, I think it's going to be a good year ahead for the Bulldogs. Matt Turk and Jay McKee, what they've done and put in and Mike Landlauer and just the foundation in that team. And it's no surprise when you see a player come in that's maybe, had some challenges elsewhere, and then you see him land in Brantford and that Bulldog organization, and they take off, and it's a real credit to the group that they have there and the foundation that they've put in place.
Going to put you on the spot with one question. You don't have to answer it. You don't have to. Do you think the team's coming back to Hamilton?
You know what? What I know is, you gave me a softball there. What I know, they're playing in Brantford this year, right? And we'll see what happens. And Reed and I both when Troy, when we do the games on the air, that's kind of what we talk about, is just like, hey, let's look ahead to let's enjoy what's in front of us right now. Other people are involved in those decisions, and we'll see how it plays out.
Nice answer.
Thanks.
You're pretty good at this stuff. Speaking of hockey, the National Hockey League, the training camp, oh my goodness, it's back. And, of course, the world will be dominated by the Maple Leafs. With this said, though, after a number of moves that have been made, General Manager Brad Treliving has his team, his head coach. His vision is now 100% in. The stuff from Keith, that's gone. This is his team now. What kind of pressure is he under right now?
Brad Treliving? Yeah, I think it's, what do they say? You get a chance to hire one. Every general manager gets a chance to hire one head coach of their own, sometimes two. So in this case, he's brought in Craig Berube, who is his guy. I mean, with the cap era now, it's so anyone who follows the league and like ourselves, Bubba, know that it's really tough to make big wholesale moves, and just with the limitations of the cap and what's part of that, and everyone's trying to lock up their players, but. Yeah, he's made his moves sort of really looking. He's pushed the chips on the defense, right? Looked to upgrade the defense with Tanev and Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Hakanpää coming in to see if he's identified that as the area in goaltending where he thinks they've needed to upgrade. And I mean, we'll find out come what, April, May, June, depending how it all plays out. And I maybe look at it a little differently than some. I think there's a group of people out there who think that the Leafs consistently underachieve in the playoffs. You look at their regular season record; they're a 10th, 9th-ish place team. They've never won the division, at least the Atlantic Division. I mean, they won the Canadian Division that one year during the COVID season.
And then they blew it.
That season, I think you could say that they blew it. Certainly up 3-1 against a team that finished however many points behind you in the standings. But the Canadians got hot, and a little bit of doubt created in the Leafs. But yeah, they've generally ran up against Cup champions in Tampa Bay or finalists over the years, and I'm not letting them off the hook. I'm just saying it's I look at it a little bit differently. But at some point, you hope that this team can come through. But I don't know. I still remember when they couldn't even make the playoffs. So it's
I feel like you can't get it. I mean, yes, the 1 year. I mean, the big goal by Tavares. Just hard in overtime. They finally get over the hump and beat Tampa Bay, and then they get whacked. Everyone's like, we want to play Tampa. We want to play Florida. We want to play Florida. Right. And yeah, you got Florida, all right. Right? It didn't last very long, right?
What a train they were that year.
Oh my goodness!
Last year they're going to win the Cup.
Yeah, I mean, and it's crazy to see, and of course all the drama against Boston over the years. I think it's interesting that Treliving now he's got this situation right now, whether he wants to deal with it. I know he's very good at deflecting it with the media, and there's the Mitch Marner situation. Don Robertson and I have talked about this too, and he's like, you've got to get this guy to play a certain brand of hockey for this team to be successful. Like, it just can't be freewheeling and dealing, and you've got these high scorers and these offensive players like Nylander. I'll throw him in there along with obviously Austin Matthews. They've got to come together and play better as a team. I mean, it's that simple. We'll be talking about this for the next 8 to 10 months, as you said. It's just the way it goes with the Maple Leafs. But I do believe there's a certain amount of pressure right now, and you're right. The Hakanpää thing was interesting to me because he's 6'7". He's just a monster on the ice, but he has some knee issues as well. I don't know. What are you looking at Max Pacioretty for? I don't know. I mean, he was here in Hamilton.
Yep.
Kind of.
Yeah, he was an NHL Bulldog, right?
Yeah, he was a kind of guy. Even then, he was sort of like, yeah, we got to push this guy a little bit. And I know he's lasted in the league for a long time, but he's also had back-to-back years when he's with Carolina of having Achilles issues. So I guess it's a PTO, so it's low risk, maybe high reward. But yeah,
and I think the narrative, the narrative around this team has been they need to strengthen their defense, and certainly you always need a strong goal. You build teams from the net out, right? That's the old cliche, but their challenge last year was scoring goals, and you look at how many goals they scored in that 7-game series against Boston, or something like 12, or I don't have the exact number off the top of my head clearly, but there are a number of games where it's scoring goals, and whether that's again, the old cliche, but players not going to the dirty areas. And Don Robertson has seen a few hockey games over the years, so he's got some knowledge in that topic. And all those years he's ran the Real McCoys. But yeah, is it too many shots from the perimeter? Or is it whatever it might be? Right, it's something that needs to change. And there's been many teams over the years that never break through. Right, there's been some great Bruins teams back in the 70s and Rangers back then that great teams and never won. And certainly that the Leafs wouldn't be the first team to assemble a lot of great talent and never win if that's what happens. But yeah, it's gonna be a fun year ahead, and I'm sure there will be no analysis, right?
No,
there won't be much chatter about it all. No. People will be super patient, just waiting to see what happens.
Well, because the Jays are so lousy this year, right? And that it's now opened the door for Maple Leaf chatter, because I think people are so, I hate to say this word, disgusted. They are literally disgusted in the Blue Jays and their management. So it's like, you know what? They're done. They're virtually eliminated from the postseason. What is there? 12 games left, and everyone's focus is just shifted over to the Maple Leafs and what's going to happen, because there is always expectation when you haven't won in 55 years in the so-called hockey market central of the world. It's going to create its own little conversation.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I know you want to move on, but just sort of that whole symbiotic with all the teams in Toronto, right? So you've got you're right. You've got the Blue Jays, who maybe some years would take the heat off the Leafs, right?
Oh, yes.
Because they'd go on a big run in October, and everybody would be excited about that, and then say, oh yeah, let's start paying attention to hockey. And then you flip it over to the NBA side, and I know you want to talk WNBA, but you look at the Raptors, who for years took the heat off, or took a lot of attention away, because they were a really good team, and now they're rebuilding and trying to get themselves back. So yeah, I think the pressure and the focus is generally always on the Leafs, but will likely, as you say, Bubba, be magnified this year.
Speaking of the WNBA, in her last game on the weekend, Caitlin Clark, you know the name, she dropped a career-high 35 points, and she set the WNBA scoring record mark. Does this mean anything to you? I mean, and I would say the neat thing is that for the first time, I guess her Fever, the Indiana Fever, they're going to the postseason. There's been so much conversation. I mean, you look at women's sport, never anyone bigger, in my opinion. Please help me if I'm leaving anyone out. But boy, there's been a lot of conversations. Does this mean anything in terms of getting all these records that she has accomplished in her rookie season?
Yeah, so we're not, I'll fully admit, don't follow the league super close. But what I will say is, last year when Caitlin Clark was playing for Iowa and was playing in March Madness, we hardly missed a game in our house, right? We were making sure that we tuned in. So
why?
I think just the story was compelling, and of course there was so much attention on her. So I mean, you look at in that team, but you look at any great athlete in any sport. So you go way back to Tiger Woods in golf, right? And what he did in terms of the late 90s, early 2000s, to take people who were maybe casual observers of a sport and turn it into must-see, must-watch TV. And I think that's what she did. So there was an interesting story to follow because you knew so much about it. And you'd see the clips late at night on ESPN of her draining a three from the logo and all those things. Everything went viral, right? And that's what kind of attracted our attention. And then as you're watching, you start to go, oh, it's a really good product, right? And this is something maybe that, you start to enjoy the brand of basketball, what it brings. And, lots of controversy. And how often have we seen this before, right, in any sport where the rookie comes in and suddenly takes the attention away, and then there creates a bit of controversy, right? Because
tons of friction.
Those players who have been in the league and like, hey, wait a minute, we've been here for 5-10 years, building this league, and we're the ones who have put this league where it is, and the WNBA making tremendous strides. We're going to have a team in Toronto, which is fantastic. It's understandable there to be a little bit of resentment, jealousy, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it really has. I think in this case, you would think that kind of friction, that kind of controversy would draw eyes away, and like people don't have time for it. But it's gotten bigger. It's like this monster that keeps getting bigger and bigger, and this is only her first year, right? You could be looking at, I don't know, the Larry Bird of the WNBA, like the one. And I will bring in the color thing. I think it is a conversation, right? Because it has been a league definitely dominated by black women, and there is this white from Iowa, played at Iowa, like this sort of farm country, and she shoots the lights out, right? And she is setting records and upon records. But I guess at the end of the day, more eyes. There's a team. Let's be honest. When Caitlin, the Indiana Fever, if she's still playing for that team at that point, wherever the WNBA, I think it's a Coca-Cola Coliseum, it will be sold out. Fair to say?
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned about Caitlin Clark and Larry Bird, and that's an interesting parallel because that was. I mean, your sports history, Bubba. I mean, you look back to that NCAA final between Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, and that suddenly took March Madness and took it to a whole other level because many people tuned in. I remember watching it. Yes, I'm not old, but I remember watching it. And then that rivalry carried over with Dr. J into the NBA, right? And so will we see that with the WNBA now, and the number of tough players that Caitlin Clark's gone up against, and now to maybe just sort of the impetus to take that league to the next level as well. And
well, it's a win-win for all, right? And if there is a little friction and a little heat between the players, I think we like it. We're attracted to that kind of stuff. Me and yourself as media members, we love to talk about it. It creates conversation. It gives places like ESPN, who are 24-hour sports, gives them 24 hours of content in a place that really they've never been before, and really has done something to help women's sport grow at the end of the day. Whether you like her or whether you don't like her, as the old Don Cherry saying goes, 50% of the people love me, 50% of the people hate me, but 100% of you all watch me. Works, doesn't it?
It's a good way to look at it.
Certainly, that's the only way to really look at it, too, and especially if you own a TV station or a radio station for that matter. Hey, Norm, this has been fabulous. I mean, I'm looking forward to your analysis and listen to you. You guys do such a wonderful job. I don't even consider it cable TV or whatever. You guys are so professional in your approach, the way you commentate the games. You got a great play-by-play broadcaster. Between the two of you guys who do the with Troy coming in as well too, and doing the analysis as well, and sometimes you throw them down on the ice as well. It's a great threesome that you guys have, and you know your stuff, and it just comes across so well.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, I've been really fortunate, and I was able to kind of get my start through Todd Crocker, who I know you know, and now Todd's been the voice of the Marlies for years and does a great job there. And I was, fortunate to sit in and do some games with him on the Marlies. So, I have to full credit to Todd, who helped get me into this. And like a lot of people.
How many years has it been now?
Oh, gosh, probably back late 90s, early 2000s.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, as a kid. Some people want to be firemen, police. One point I wanted to be a broadcaster, right? So, and here I am. So, I mean, it's certainly, really fortunate with Todd. But, yeah, when I look at what we do in the Bulldogs and Todd said this, and I've been able to carry this over with Reed Duthie and Troy Islikar. It's just like we've just done here for the last little bit. It's a couple guys sitting around talking sports, and we're calling a hockey game while we're at it, and we take it serious, but we like to have some fun while we do it as well. And I know I'm doing a good job, and I've got, and of course you can't see or hear this, but I've got redoubled over in laughter at something I've said, and then I've got to kind of carry on for a little bit while he recovers during the play. And I know Troy hits him with some zingers as well. And I think Reed called us his crazy uncles at one point on this show. I guess I'll never forget that, being called the crazy uncle. But yeah, we like to have a good time. And the Bulldogs organization, Jay McKee's really generous with his time. We get a chance to check in with him before every game, and before that, Vince Lays and David Matsos and John Gruden, and it helps. And yeah, we enjoy it. The product sells itself. I'll say the cliche line: the players of the show, not us, right? We're just here to kind of help tell their stories and talk about the great things that they do, because there's some wonderful players and some wonderful athletes and all the sports that I've been fortunate to be around. And kind of the neat thing is, Todd pointed out to me one day, and I hadn't realized it, of course. I was there when the Ticats won the Grey Cup. I was there when we lost it in '98. I was there when we won it in '99, and I was there for World Cycling in 2003, and then I was there when the Bulldogs won the Calder Cup in AHL 2017 or 2007, and I've been there for 2 OHL Bulldog championships. So, pretty fortunate to be there and have a front row seat to some great moments in Hamilton sports history. So
you're the kind of guy that we need to have around all the time. You're a bit of a winner here.
I don't know about that. Five years of really bad seasons with the Ticats. So.
Well, it is, but it was all part of the growth process, right? But and I do say this because as someone that watches all the games, I get to see all the other, or listen to with the OHL package, all the other crews, right? And everyone's working hard, but you guys stand about like you guys are top notch, and I don't say that, but I just because I do hear them all. You guys are at another level, so it's great, and we're very lucky to have you here in Hamilton.
Well, thank you. There's some great crews around the league, and lots of people, as you say, putting a lot of work, and it's it's not easy, and it's easy at the same time, right? And
because you love it.
Yeah, and you know what? The biggest thing for me was, and I don't know if you found this because you did Tirecat games for years and high school sports and junior and all that sort of stuff, is when you stop stressing about being perfect, it goes easier. So you'll probably catch it, and you watch enough that you probably hear me say that I'll qualify some things once in a while. Because we've got all the stats, we've got all the information, but we're going to make mistakes. We're human. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to say Nick Lara's got 30 goals, and he actually got 34 once in a while. I try not to slip up on those sort of things. It might be somebody more on another team.
Never feel bad.
But yeah, you're going to make mistakes, but if you try to be perfect, you're going to be too uptight. So we go out there and we enjoy it, and it's and the OHL's great product, right? So
it is.
It sells itself.
Just remember, Bob Cole thought that Mike Modano scored the winner against the Sabres when it really was. We know who it was, right?
Well, and it's
it happens.
It's real time too, right? Yes. So you're watching, and I've been on. Real fortunate. I have great guys like Reed and Troy that are eagle-eyed and pick up on the cues. But there's also moments where something happens, and the people watching or listening are expecting you to have all the answers, and you don't.
You don't.
You're sitting there figuring, and that's where Reed's always great. He'll say, "Hey, folks, we're like you. We're trying to figure out what's happening."
It's just honesty, straight up honesty,
Absolutely.
though, right? As I said, I'm looking forward to the season, Guy. I hope you come back.
Yeah.
Right on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. Folks, that's your Sportsline podcast for the day. And as you've just seen and heard, we love talking sports. If you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote, the Sportsline podcast want to hear from you. Please hit the thumbs up, like, subscribe, share button. If you have something to say, please comment, because we appreciate what you always have to say. For the amazing people that make the Sportsline podcast possible, in front and, of course, well behind the camera, thank you so much. And we'll see you tomorrow.